Ever notice how certain emotional patterns are kind of like weeds in a garden? They keep cropping up no matter how many times you think you've pulled them out. You handle one difficult situation only to find yourself faced with another, unmistakably similar to the last. But what if I told you that you might be accidentally keeping these patterns going without even realizing it? Like you're stuck in a loop of drama and insecurity. Let me share a little slice of my life that might strike a chord. I grew up in a broken home, so to speak. My parents were only together for a few months of my life, and the relationship in those first few years especially was rocky, to say the least. Well, as a kid, I soaked it all up like a sponge, not realizing that those were lessons that I'd be cursed to carry into adulthood. Well, fast forward to my 20s, and there I was, latching onto partners who reflected the same ups and downs that I was used to. It felt like the world was playing this big joke on me. But was it really? You see, sometimes we can find a strange kind of comfort in the chaos, even when it's not good for us. It's like having a map that only we can read, in a place that we know too well, even if we don't want to be there. It took me a long time to understand that fixing these patterns wasn't just about solving problems on the outside, but also looking at the things from my past that were still affecting me inside. The big thing to pay attention to is something called attachment. It's the way we learn to connect with people when we're young children. About half of us have a hard time feeling secure in our relationships because of it. We often end up repeating the same kind of relationships that we saw as kids, whether it's being too clingy, too distant, sending mixed signals. But what if I told you that these patterns don't have to be permanent? That we have the power to change them? By looking inside ourselves and working on the attachment issues that we carry, we can have better, more satisfying relationships. But if we ignore them, we might keep telling ourselves the same old story that we're not good enough, and that can influence every relationship we have. But here's the thing, changing these patterns is not always easy. It means facing some uncomfortable truths and making decisions that are different than the ones that got you here. What I was teaching my soul strength activation clients this week is around something I come back to time and again. Choose your hard. What is truly harder? Pushing through the discomfort for a limited time, or continuing to live a life that's hurting you over and over again? So today we're going to explore how to connect, love, and ultimately how we can take back control of our emotional lives. When we start untangling these roots, that's when we can really start growing. And you might be surprised at just how strong you really are when you begin to change your emotional landscape. So 3 key things we will learn are how anxious attachment shows up in relationships beyond just romance, the fascinating research that reveals the timeline to create a secure attachment and what that means for your closest relationships, and why 70% of us are clinging to invisible wounds and how we can start healing.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today.
Can we talk about back-to-school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. I've hired a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you the biggest mistake that most business owners make. They think posting a job and waiting is a strategy, but it is not. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. With Sponsored Jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so that you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring so fast because the best candidates are already there, actively looking. Plus, with Indeed Sponsored Jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's be real about something. Workplace stress is not just part of the job anymore. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal, and it is not sustainable. I used to think that grinding through stress was some kind of badge of honor. Push harder, sleep less, ignore what your body was telling you. And it nearly broke me when I was working for startups. And look, maybe that voice in your head telling you to make a change is right. Maybe you do need to quit your job or completely flip your life. But whether you're making big moves or just trying to survive your current situation, you need tools to handle it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without the guilt, how to trust your intuition instead of second-guessing yourself constantly, how to make better decisions from a place of clarity instead of chaos. And BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They've got a 4.9 rating from 1.7 million reviews because it actually works. You can talk to someone from anywhere, and you can switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. A vacation won't fix chronic stress, but the right support can help you navigate whatever comes next. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove.
We can absolutely rewire some of those behaviors and thought patterns and ways of being inside of self and with somebody else. And so I divided the book up into two parts. And one is in building that inner secure attachment. And the other is how do I then roll that out in my relationship? And just to clarify there, I'm not saying at all that you need to have inner secure attachment before you can go into a relationship. Not at all, because that would be buying into this idea that we need to be kind of perfect and whole and who's there? Because
turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
I love the topic of this book, all about anxious attachment, because I feel like most of us deal with that. And I didn't realize it was a thing until later on in life. And I realized it was a thing because I'm pretty sure I struggled with it for a really good period of time. So what inspired your work into that topic in particular?
My own experience with it was my avenue in. And I think it was probably twofold. I think that I grew up in a home where there was a background noise of constant anxiety, where the nervous system of the house was probably in hyper arousal, that kind of fight or flight. And then I went into relationship with a beautiful man who I've been married to for 18 years, but in relationship with for nearly half my life. And he has avoidant tendencies. And so my natural kind of anxious tendencies came up even more in that relationship. And so that relationship was part of my own healing process and made me really curious and dive deep into attachment.
I've seen a trend where it seems like we devalue our own experiences because other people have it worse. But I think this does a disservice to us because maybe it can make us blind to our own current issues. For example, I shared in the last episode that I had this pretty tough breakup in my 20s because it was the first time that I could see, wait, I might have some issues. I might be addicted to drama. I need to be a healthy partner in order to be in a healthy partnership. And I know that there's a lot of listeners like me who see negative patterns arise, but they think, but I had supportive parents. I wasn't abused. Maybe my parents were divorced, but so are half of everyone else's parents. So I'm curious, what trends or circumstances have you noticed can lead to these types of attachment issues?
There's sort of two pathways really with the anxious style. So number one is I'm reaching out for connection. I'm wanting to get my needs met because I need to get fed. I need to feel safe. If I've got an owie, I want someone to come and hold it and rub it and to co-regulate with me. If that person is sometimes available and sometimes not available, that can create this pattern of trying to escalate to get my need met. So it might sound like mom, 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 mom. And then we know you got kids?
Yes.
Yeah. And so sometimes as a mother when it shifts from mom, mom, mom to mom, mom, mom. And there's often a change in the flavor of the call that we recognize as mothers. And when you're attuned to a child, you know the difference between that call of, oh, there's something a little bit wrong, and maybe I'm trying to tie my shoelaces and I can't really do it, to the sound of, Mom, I've really hurt myself and I need you to come right now. So when there is someone who is attuned in that way, enough of the time, we develop a secure attachment. When it's kind of there's not always a response, and it can be for lots of different reasons. Maybe caregivers are at work, maybe there's 9 kids in the house and caregivers are totally overwhelmed, or maybe they're out at work and there is nobody to call to. So lots of different reasons. Another thing that can happen is primary caregiver might be really safe, but there could be danger around, and real danger. And so inside we develop this pattern of staying really close to primary caregiver because when you're away from them, it is not safe. And then another way it can happen is if, let's say, the parent has an unprocessed trauma, like they've lost, maybe your father died and it was such a shock to mom and she never really got over it. And inside of her is this programming of, I have to keep this child close to me because it's all I have left of my husband, or I couldn't survive if I lost someone else that I love, so I need to keep this child close to me. Or maybe the child was really sick as an infant, and again, caregiver kind of went, I have to keep this child close because I'm not sure that they're safe in the world. And so the child learns, I need to stay safe, otherwise mum gets really upset. I need to stay safe, close to caregiver, or the world isn't safe for me. So there's lots of different ways that it can happen. And it doesn't have to be a big T trauma. It can be kind of 100,000 tiny paper cuts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like we're always trying to fit ourselves and our lives into categories. And I'm wondering how much divorce really does affect our attachment issues. I always thought divorce didn't affect me, especially since it happened so young. I didn't have like that breakup moment. But then I thought, maybe that's worse because as a 2-year-old, I'm being sent over to my dad's house and it just felt foreign and uncomfortable, especially because he didn't have custody very often. And divorce does affect so many people, 50% of marriages, which means 50% of children. So I feel like it's worth bringing up. I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends who dealt with divorce in that same way, where they almost could feel like they were in the power position sometimes. Like they got to choose when they went over there until they couldn't. I'm wondering how much those types of dynamics can influence relationships and attachment style. Maybe it's the lack of the strong father figure. I personally got a stepdad later on, but he wasn't the type that would tell me what to do. It was always ask your mom because the boundaries are kind of blurred. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I step into that, and it's so beautiful that you've shared that. Thank you. And I imagine being a 2 or 3-year-old, and I remember from my own kids how little that is. You're only just out of a nappy. You're only just kind of, you're probably still not even really able to make yourself a bowl of cereal. Like you really need care, and you're really still learning that co-regulation. And then I think about your safe person is your mom. That sounded like she's your secure attachment person. She's your person. She's attuned to you. You're safe with her. And then every now and again for 2, 3 days a week, you're taken away and put somewhere else away from your person. That's the piece where I'd be really curious. Because if I think about that, like 2 or 3 days for a 2 or 3-year-old, that's a really long time. And then we don't have a concept of time. And so how long is that? 2 or 3, we can't know, oh, in 3 days I'm going back. Like how long is that even for a 3-year-old? And so I would imagine there would be this sort of, well, is that person coming back? Are they, and there's no concept of, okay, it's going to happen again next week. Because again, no concept of time perhaps. How does that rest when I say that?
Yeah, lots coming up for me, specific memories. But I think what I've grown into the most is learning to see my parents and their situation as real human experiences of imperfect people. I sometimes compare my current situation to my parents and think, well, should they have known better in this? Should they have been more intentional? But then I remember my mom had kids 10 years before I did. If you would have handed me a child at age 25, who knows what varying mistakes I would have made. And so I think that's been a big part of growth, is just really trying to see the circumstances that they came from and what created their specific personalities and struggles. I know my dad came from a lot of trauma. My mom came from a different situation. And so they brought their own issues into our circumstances. And so I can either demonize them for that, or I can have compassion for that and realize on some level, I chose those situations for my own personal growth. I mean, especially with the divorce circumstances, like in mine, my dad, who did end up growing into being a pretty great person, would take me to the movies and then go camping instead, which might be full-blown kidnapping. So my poor mom. But I do think it's important to highlight some of these things and some of the lived experiences of other people, because then you can be a lot more cautious and intentional about what that child needs to feel safe and loved and attached with the situation that they do have.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. And as an added dimension, absolutely, dad's only supposed to take you to go see a movie and you're away for 3 days, and mom's probably feeling really anxious, and maybe on some level as a little one, you're also feeling that anxiety, and maybe even the build up as she feels anxious to the movie date. Sounds actually quite multi-layered, and I can absolutely understand where an insecure attachment would arise out of that. Yeah, because there's all this coming together and separating, and not a lot of consistency around it, and actually a lot of fear coming from some of the adults. So, yeah.
One of the things that I see happen a lot, and I experienced a lot when I first started figuring out the root cause of some of my behavioral issues, which were many later on in life. But there was a pretty good period of time where I really thought that I was broken, that it was going to be really hard to heal. And even now, with all of the work that I've done, there's certain moments where I just will kind of sink into a woe is me. And now I have a different relationship with that. I know to kind of just focus on the sensations and realize there are emotions in my body that need to release. But one of the things that you talk about in your book is how anxiously attached people are not flawed. Share more about that, because I think it's something that a lot of us need to hear. And I do recognize that there's just a lot of anxiously attached people in this world. And so it stems from so many things. What do you mean when you say that they're not flawed?
That it's an adaptation, and they talk about that a lot in the beginning of the book. And so in the beginning of the book, in chapter 1, I talk about attachment styles and what it is and how to recognize the patterns. And then the rest of the book is all about how to work with it. I really wanted to give a gift, which was about how do I work with this? How do I work with it in myself? How do I work with it with other people? So I'm very clear in the introduction. I talk about it being an adaptation, because if I am not with my secure person, if I can't get my needs met, then we have to do something to get the needs met, to be seen, to be heard, to be attuned to. So we're reaching for that attunement and love. And so it's always adaptive. So I look through a lens therapeutically where all behavior, it has come from somewhere. And I find that when I speak to parts in myself and parts with clients that might be doing really extreme behaviors, they might be going out and drinking when we get stressed at work, or they might be, lots of different things. But when you actually speak to that part and really get to know that part will say things like, I want you to be happy. And so when you get really stressed like that, and that those feelings come up in your body, then I do what I do best, and I take you out drinking. And that's my way of keeping you safe, because that part can't see all the other fallout that happens when I go out drinking, which might be dangerous or bad for my body. It has there's no perspective. That part only has a lens of, I have to stop this painful feeling, and I will do whatever it takes. And usually it's my go-to thing to stop that pain. So it's an adaptation.
I have found that perspective is so helpful in self-compassion. And self-compassion is necessary to prevent a whole downward spiral, which I pretty much mastered in my 20s, was that downward spiral. I just kept going. When you thought it should stop, it just kept going. And it's funny how now I love the example that you used, because it reminds me of the evolution of people in general. Like in my early 20s, my downward spirals were almost fueled because it's like, oh, it's the anniversary of my dad's death. I'm grieving. And a friend's like, let's take a shot. Let's not think about it. Let's go out. That's exactly how my own inner protective mechanisms are. And now I've cultivated more friendships where it's like, what do you need? Just talk about him. Let's release this, and allowing me to emote in a healthier way. But I don't look back at those old friendships and think, well, what is wrong with you? Like, what a horrible way to deal with my grief. No, you just recognize that's a friend doing a friend thing. Whereas for some reason, it's often more difficult to have that separation. It's like, oh, well, I'm hurting and now I'm drunk. And look at you, you're always screwing up. And we just go through this whole sort of self-sabotage thing where we're just beating ourselves up, which makes us feel worse, which just increases that negative spiral of patterns.
Yes. So beautifully put. And it's the super common spiral as well, when we've been out drinking and maybe we've promised ourselves we wouldn't do that again. And maybe stuff happened when we've been out and not really been so aware. And then the next day the shame comes up. And so I look at that through a path lens. And so there's this shame path that then comes up that might sound really harsh and critical. And then the shame feelings come up, and then we want to numb them out again. And how do we do that?
When you're looking at moving through this anxious attachment, do you see it as sort of just figuring out that this is how you're going to feel and maybe mitigating it with different behaviors? Or do you see an opportunity to actually even rewire some of our responses to where they're not so strong?
Absolutely the latter. There's absolutely an opportunity. So we know that about 20% of the population is anxiously attached and about 50% of the population is insecurely attached. So there's a lot of people who are working with this in different ways. We can absolutely rewire some of those behaviors and thought patterns and ways of being inside of self and with somebody else. And so I divided the book up into two parts, and one is in building that inner secure attachment, and the other is how do I then roll that out in my relationship? And just to clarify there, I'm not saying at all that you need to have inner secure attachment before you can go into a relationship. Not at all, because that would be buying into this idea that we need to be kind of perfect and whole and who's there? Because I'm definitely not. It's kind of who is that? So that can keep us on that treadmill of we're never going to be good enough no matter how much work we do on ourselves. So it can absolutely be done. At the same time, you can be working with your attachment, and one of the best places to do it, in fact, can be in a relationship, working on that inner secure attachment and the attachment with other.
I can totally see how both of those approaches helped me to move into a healthier relationship. I'm very proud of my marriage. Yes, we still have issues, but we communicate so well that they never last longer than a brief period of time. It doesn't roll over into days. And I do see how I had started to do a lot of work to get to a place where I think I could be a healthy person in a relationship, healthier. Because then I see how once I found that relationship healed so much in me. And I had gotten to a place where those behaviors weren't still there, but those thoughts and those triggers were still very much there. I needed to be very vigilant. And there was something about finding love that I truly believe helped me heal. And when he treats me in such a way, it's like I experience some sort of healing. And so I worry, though, that if I hadn't gotten to a specific place, I wouldn't have attracted a man that could do that for me. And I do see that so often it's like people that are anxiously attached attract the person that is a mirror for all their issues. Like it's like maybe a lot of their patterns came from having a dad that wasn't there for them. So then they get in a relationship that's very avoidant. Why do you think that happens? Or how do you see that coming out in relationships?
Yeah, when we're not used to getting our needs met, when we go into a relationship where our needs don't get met, although logically we can see my needs not getting met and I'm not happy in this relationship, there are other parts of us that feel, oh, this is familiar. I know this. And there are also parts of us I've experienced through my own work and work with others that are looking for redemption. Let me unpack that. Let's say I had a dad who's really absent, who doesn't show any love and affection. His work is his life. We're all really clear that work comes before everything else. Money comes before everything else. And there's really very little interaction with me as a young girl. And then I get this image of kind of the little girl looking at him through a glass door, kind of unreachable. I can't have contact with him. When I get older, that little girl is still stuck frozen in time and space, looking through that glass door at him. In my new relationship, I pair up with someone who just loves their work. They're so passionate about their work and it's inspiring, right? We get into relationship together and pretty soon it's really clear his work is way more important than me. And that gets played out over and over again. And so there I am again, almost as that little girl looking through the glass door. If I can make him see me, if I can make him love me and want me, I'm redeemed and I am lovable. I am worthy of love. So there is an opportunity for healing and there's an opportunity for great pain as well in those situations.
You use a phrase that I haven't really heard in attachment theory before, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But you call these moments attachment injuries. And I'm curious, what do you see in people who don't have maybe that upward progression of like, okay, well, this is what I was dealt in childhood. I'm going to get a little bit better, a little more introspective. And it's like a slow healing. They might still end up in relationships that damage that a little bit more, that poke the wound, as I like to say. But a lot of people I know are on a sort of upward trajectory, but there's a whole population of people that just keep replaying these injuries. I want to understand the consequences of not at least intending to find healing. Like if you don't identify that you have these wounds and you just keep doing it, what are the consequences of that?
The consequences are that we strengthen our sense of self as not being worthy of that love and attention and affection, and our image of the other person and what to expect relationally gets more kind of embedded. But underneath all of that is I sense this kind of deep unhappiness is at the bottom of that, this kind of deep unhappiness. So I'm guessing that most people listening to your podcast are really looking for healing and how to shift patterns. And like I said, there are absolutely ways that you can shift patterns internally in the way that it sounds like you've done in your healing journey. And I know me too, shifting big patterns in my own healing.
So in my story, and it sounds like maybe yours too, a lot of that healing came from actually finding a relationship that allowed me the space to heal. But there's a lot of people out there, and I get messages from people quite often where they're in this healing journey after they've already committed in a relationship that might exacerbate some of these patterns. How do you recommend that you begin to heal without necessarily, like, maybe it's not bad enough to where like, okay, I'm with a horrible guy, let me divorce him, or vice versa. But you want to maybe lead that change within the relationship and hope that your partner will catch up. What do you recommend in that scenario?
I love that question. I would recommend some couple work. There are beautiful moments that can happen in couple work. There's a type of couple therapy called emotionally focused couple therapy. It's the modality from Sue Johnson. And in that, there is space for, first of all, space to be heard in a really different way. There is an invitation to drop down under expressed emotions where anger might get expressed, and which is often common for the anxious partner. The avoidant partner will often withdraw. In that modality, we get to really break down what's happening in that cycle. I sense you pull away. I protest. I escalate. Which a child would do. Mom, like I'm here. And the partner feels, for different reasons of their own, they kind of pull away. In that type of therapy, we get to really get curious about both of those behaviors and to have different conversations being held by a therapist can be very powerful. I did some of that work with my husband, and we both found it really helpful. My husband would finish the sessions and say, Jen, it's like open heart surgery.
I don't know if you want to scare away the partners here. Are there cases where this anxious attachment type behavior is not within a romantic relationship?
Yeah, there's research that shows that it will play out at work. It'll play out in leadership roles, in how we receive feedback. So it does play out in other areas. I've had other people say to me that it plays out for them in friendships as well. I didn't feel it so much with friendships, but I felt it in my intimate relationship. The primary place is going to be with that person who we're forming secure attachment with. And it takes, research has shown, about 2 years to form a secure attachment with someone. I have lots of people who, when I say that, go, oh, dear, that's so long. But also there's sort of this natural progression. I think when we're in a really curious place in a relationship and we're getting to know each other, that there is this gradual, because before we meet someone, our go-to people might be our friends, might be our siblings, might be family. And they show that over a 2-year period, generally our go-to person will slowly shift to be our partner. And that needs to be a process, because we don't know at the beginning. In the first 3 months, we might feel like we really know somebody, but the bottom line is we don't know what they look like when they've lost their job and they're struggling financially, and when things hit the fan. We haven't seen them when they're really angry yet.
I could see how potentially dynamics within friendships could lead to anxious attachments. I was just getting memories of like, okay, well, what else could have led to this? Moving schools a lot, being bullied at different times, having the new girl come in and talk my best friend out of being best friends with me. Like all these things, they seem like just a part of life, but those are really traumatic moments when you really look back at it, because there's so much identity in this rejection, in feeling like maybe you're not worthy of that friend. Or back then, I didn't have the understanding of saying like, oh, well, this person is probably just unhappy with herself, and so she's projecting it onto me and whatever. Instead, it's like, oh, this girl that seems very cool thinks I am not, which means I am not, or I'm not worthy of being in this circle. And so we just create so much meaning around different situations. And I know I did. And maybe it was the only childness or whatever it was, where I didn't have other people to bounce back ideas off of, or to get another perspective from somebody that was my age. You just get your mom. It's like, oh, it's your mom. She's got to say that. And it has me thinking with my own children, because there's so much that I went through that I didn't really understand how painful it was until I was an adult. Is there anything as a parent that you can do to mitigate some of this meaning that children create? Like, I want to do things differently, but I'm not exactly sure how.
You hit the nail on the head about, oh, mom, you have to say that. My kids say that to me. Oh, mom, you have to say that. I think number one is being a safe space for them. So whatever they bring, really helping them to feel accepted, to feel loved. The common humanity of the problem often, that I can hear that you're in a lot of pain, really validating their feelings. Sometimes I'll say to my kids, where are you feeling that uncomfortable feeling? That they do it themselves now. They'll say, Mom, I feel really anxious. It's in my stomach. They know. Where are you feeling it in your body? And kind of being with them in their feeling. So a lot of parents, I think, inadvertently will kind of, oh no, it's okay, it's going to be fine, da, 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 and they won't spend enough time with the child in the feeling. So kind of, I like to imagine it like you're stepping in. That's what empathy is, right? You stand in someone else's shoes. You kind of slip into their world and sense in my own body, what would that feel like for me? And I might say, I can imagine that might feel really sad, and like I feel like this aching in my chest when I think about what's happening for you. And then often you'll see your child or hear or see them go. And then when a shift has happened, they'll often do a kind of a big sigh, and they might even relax into you a little bit when they feel really heard and really validated. And so rather than coming in with the problem solving, which I think can be, my parents would do this, is we get kind of we're busy, let me problem solve and then move on. Rather coming in with this kind of unending empathy and being with them for long enough that you perceive a shift, either thematically with the exhale, with the movement, or sometimes they'll just suddenly change topic. Like, that's done. And they'll just say something like, are we going to make those cookies we were talking about? And then you'll know, oh, okay, clearly their mind has moved on from that. And then you might ask something like, how do you think, what are you needing at school? Is there any way that I can support you? Do you want to run through a conversation to have with that old best friend? Would that be helpful? Yeah. Do you want a book about how to repair friendships, or a book about bullying, and kind of just exploring?
One thing I'm super grateful for in motherhood is that it's opened my eyes in beautiful ways, especially about self-healing and understanding toddler behavior, because we don't really realize how many of our responses are irrational. In my 20s, I'd push past my fear and hurt and trauma instead of just facing them. And I learned that instead of just trying to get over things, it's more healing to lie down, acknowledge my feelings, and offer myself compassion so that they can actually move through me. And this is just so different from how so many of our parents approached emotions. They meant well, but they could maybe dismiss our feelings, telling us that we're fine or we're making too much of something. And that wasn't just in toddlerhood. It can happen even now. I have so many friends who have this relationship with their mother. But recently I had this really healing conversation with my mom. She did so many things right, but there were some things that did leave a mark. And it was just important for me to express that. Our parents' generation wasn't trained to talk about feelings the way that we are. So in this convo with her, I managed to stay calm and explain to her that I wasn't trying to blame her, but just wanted to talk it out, wanted to bring light to these feelings to heal. And something in her softened, and we had this really productive conversation. And it just felt so freeing. I had a similar talk with a friend facing her own issues with her parents, which just made me realize that I had been bracing for a defensive response. But by letting go of that expectation of how I thought she was going to react, I opened myself up to a new possibility. And my mom really came through. It just showed me how much we can heal when we address our own side of the street and we address the traumas, or however we want to frame them, directly.
That is such a beautiful, healing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. What a beautiful experience. And with sometimes it can go really well, and some adults, too much shame comes up in their own system that they have to block it because of their own shame. Or sometimes parents have just blocked out heaps of things that happened and will not even remember it, and will say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember it at all. Everyone's a bit different. But what you said then about kind of surrendering it, and my own experience with my father especially, is that I got a lot more understanding when I was an adult, and a lot of healing when he was able to share with me some of the things he went through. I had some big, okay, then that makes sense. All that other stuff that happened makes a lot of sense. Now I know that piece, and a lot more compassion could come into me, into that relationship, because of understanding how it was for him more deeply, and just bits that I just didn't know.
I know, I'm already expecting 20 years from now, my child being like, yeah, but you did this. Yeah, but you did this. Yeah, but you were on your phone too much, or whatever it is. And I'm like, I am so aware of the things that I dealt with now that I'm like, okay, how do I mitigate this? But there's another side to this where, have you ever heard of a woman named Abigail Schreier? It just came out with a book. She's a friend of a friend. And I saw my friend shared a clip of her on Joe Rogan. And apparently she's got new research. I just saw this clip. I didn't even listen to the whole episode. But it talks about how now this generation has kind of gone too far on the feeling side, and that we're basically raising our kids a bit too softly. And there's things that I really, really agree with her on, at least in the 10-minute clip that I saw. And also probably things that I don't, where I do feel like I needed that validation of emotions. I see such a healing in that. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on where is that line? When do we actually need to say, okay, toughen up, you can get back up? Because there's such a big part in that resilience piece of like really trusting yourself to get back up and not stay stuck in that emotion. And I don't think that she's saying to not validate your children's feelings, but I think what she is bringing up is this idea of putting too much focus on feelings, especially at a young age. And it's creating a population of kids where they're like, oh, I just feel depressed, and they don't know how to get out of it, or that they can just get back up and overcome their 14-year-old breakup or whatever it is. So what have you learned in that area of that fine line, I would call it?
Yeah. What I've learned is that each child is different. And where that line is in every moment for every child is different. It's so hard to generalize. I hear what she's saying. It's that whole thing about a child will never learn to tie their own shoes if they're not left alone to struggle with the laces. Yes, you want to be shown how to do it, but there needs to be a certain amount of struggle. Absolutely. And I think as a parent, there's a scene that I use sometimes in therapy, like going into a playground, and going to a playground with a mother, and you walk in and you're holding the mother's hand, and you look around at the playground to assess how safe it is. And the mother's also assessing for safety. Are there any dangerous people? Are there any dogs around? I don't know. They're just kind of checking. And then the child will, maybe you walk up to the swings, and the child has a go on the swings, and then maybe you say, okay, I'm going to go sit down on a blanket now. And then they go to the slide, and then they're on the slide, but they're looking at you. Yeah, this is the attachment piece, right? They're looking at you. Our mum's there. If I need her, she's there. Sometimes you'll see children and they'll get up to the top of the slide. Before they slide down, they'll wave, mom, mom, and they give you a wave, and then they go down. But they're just checking. They're checking that you're there. That's the secure attachment. So how do we support from a distance so that they know that we're there if we need them? And how do we let them? I remember my daughter climbing up, she was young, maybe about 3, climbing up. We have a big spider's web thing on our playground that was near us, and it was high, maybe 12, maybe 12 meters high. So not mostly teenage kids that are going up there. And my daughter was just out of nappies and she was going all the way to the top. And I wasn't sure that I could get her from the top. So I would kind of look around and think, okay, well, if I couldn't go, I would trust that there are a few other people that could go and help her down. So there is a struggle, I think, for parents. Is it safe for them to do that? Can I help them with the thing that they're doing if they get into trouble? So there's this constant safety assessing that we don't even know that we're doing. We just do it organically, that we're doing and that our child's doing. And the first place that they look is, I remember my daughter, she would climb up the first 3 big brackets on the rope thing, and then she would look at me to see, am I going to say, oh no, come down? Or am I going to say, off you go, you're okay? And so sometimes I would say to her, I'm not sure I can get you, but I think that person and that person, who we don't know, might be able to get you if you get stuck. And so together we would kind of assess safety and danger. Has it swung too far the other way? Is it all about feelings? Look, I'm not seeing heaps of people just sitting down and discussing for hours on end children's feelings. So I would still say that most parents could do with doing a little bit more of that, a little bit more slowing down and being with, but not to the point where it tips over the edge. And that is often a felt sense thing, I think. And I think having had 2 children, my kids are now 13, 15. My children are very different. Their needs are very different. Their bodily felt sensations are very different. Emotionality is really different. They need different holding. And it took me a while to learn that when I had my second child, who had very different emotional needs to the first. Like her cry was very different. The intensity was very different.
That's such a good reflection in general, because I think the same thing goes with ourselves. I've seen my ebb and flow of when do I really need to cuddle myself? And then when do I need that more masculine energy of all right, just get back up and get shit done, And I need both at different times. And so often we're looking for this guidebook on how to deal with our children, our inner child, ourselves. But it's not that simple. It's the real flex is understanding, being intuitive enough to be able to tell what the situation calls for, whether that is your children, whether that's yourself, whether it's a coworker or a partner. And one of the things that I've found is being able to step back and asking myself, what do I need? And in the same way with my children, asking what message am I really giving right now? One small example is with my child, I noticed that I would say oh, it's okay, mommy's here. And then I was like, wait, maybe I'm thinking too much into this, but do I want the message to be that when you're upset, you just need mommy? I do want him to know that I'm always there. But what if instead I said it's okay, you're safe? And it's not just about me holding him and being safe or whatever, but to really instill that internal voice, because what I have learned is that a lot of times our parents' voices become our inner voices later on. And so in that realization, I actually tell myself that when I'm feeling anxious, and I've started to have these weird anxious spells a little bit more often than I used to since giving birth. I think it's just hormone fluctuations. But instead of whatever other coping behaviors, I just sort of have the mantra, you are safe, you are calm, you are grounded. And it really helps. And so a lot of times I'm going back and forth, something will happen with my kid and I'm you know what, I'm going to use that for myself next time. Or something will happen with me and I'm you know what, that's a good point. That's a message that I can take through to him. But my point being that we need to stop looking outside of ourselves for the answers and start to really trust that we have them within ourselves so that we can pull out different things from our internal toolbox and be present and aware enough to know which tool needs to come out in that moment.
There's a few things in that, and I love your deep thinking. I can hear how reflective you are and how much you're paying attention to what's happening inside and outside. I really admire that. Just want to really speak to that. There is a piece for children around co-regulation and learning to regulate off of another regulated grown up. It doesn't always have to be mommy, it can be teacher or somebody else. But there is something very powerful for children around having that consistent, they've hurt themselves, they feel just pain all over their body. They're not sure if they have to go to hospital, they don't know, right? So they cry and someone turns up. And a secure attachment belief and experience is a knowing that when I need somebody, someone will be there for me. So when I hear you say, it's okay, mommy's here, to me, that's imprinting that core message of somebody who loves you will be there when you need them, when you reach out. And you're safe is also a great message. I think both I don't feel necessarily one over the other. I think both are a great message. I'm here for you, someone is here for you, and you're safe. And helping them to a wonderful process for children. Let's say a child's fallen over, hurt themselves. They come up, they might want to hug straight away, and then they might even start shaking a little bit of discharging. And then it might sound like you were on the bar, you've had a big fright, and often they'll kind of nod. Oh, had a big fright. Yeah, that was really scary. You fell really hard. Yes, I fell very hard. I imagine that was really frightening. Yes, it was really frightening. And then often you hear the sigh. And then there's a piece around, oh, I saw you running down the hill. Yes, mommy, I ran down the hill. And then they might say, and then I fell over my foot. And then you repeat it. Yeah, and then you fell over your foot. So what they're doing there is they're putting together the pieces, one piece at a time of what happened. Just super helpful for them integrating something that was totally overwhelming. Yep, you fell over your foot. Yeah, and then what happened? Then I looked up at you. Okay, and then what happened? And then you stood up. And then what happened? And then you came to me, and then we hugged. And then often you'll see them again go. Then often they'll sit for a while. You might just kind of rock them or tap them or see what they need. And then often they'll then I would find my kids would kind of then push me away. Enough. And then they go back up the hill again to do it all over again. Okay, done. It's processed through. There's nothing left. They're not talking about it later on. Maybe they're showing their buoy to dad or somebody else, but it's not with that same, there's no tears coming with it. It's kind of like, I've been held, done. Nothing more left.
It's funny. So often in parenting, I read a book and there's this process. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to replicate this. And they throw me by surprise. And I'm like, that did not turn out how I thought it would. But with that, it totally does for me with my son. That sigh is real and it happens so often with us. His is so cute too. It's like, it's like this hum almost. And I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And I can like feel him melt into me in those moments. And it's so rewarding because I feel like I've done something good as a mother. Like I've absorbed whatever needs to be released or emoted. And so I'm wondering, is there a way that we can do that for ourselves as well? I have been able to see in past experiences, especially for some reason, the ones with like friendships or relationships, something where there's like my side of the story that needs to be told. It's like I need to process it and talk. It would come out in gossip. I can think of a couple of friendships that ended in specific ways. And it's like, I really felt like I needed to share my side of the story to any mutual friends. And I hated that about myself, really. And so it's something that I haven't had a friendship breakup in quite a long time, so it hasn't really needed to come out. But I've often wondered, what is that healthy way for us to process? Is that why journaling is so helpful? Is there a way where we can just speak through and validate ourselves to where we don't hold on to those things and it's not just constantly repeating until we feel like we've made our version the reality for everyone?
Yeah. I feel that the best way is, if you can, to do it with somebody else, and the best person is going to be with a therapist where they can really hold space and help you go into, okay, that's the trigger. Right now, that's the trigger, but what is it triggering underneath? It'll often be when there's a strong feeling like that, it'll often lead into something else. I've had those experiences too. I've asked my husband a few times, can you just sort of hear my side? He has a tendency to want to give advice. And so I have to preface the conversation with, I just need you to hear me. And I don't always want you to be on my side, but just for this, could you just be on my side and empathize with me and tell me that it really sucked? And so then he's very good at stepping into that space once he kind of knows how I would like to be held, which is actually me expressing a need. It's kind of me knowing this topic, this is how I'd really like you to hold me. And I know that there are two sides to this story and that I'm not 100% right. But right now I would just like you, because you're my person. I'd like you just to be with me and hold me. And can you do that? He says yes. And then I would just go for it. And often I'll feel myself get to a point of, oh yeah, I feel so much better. Can I just have a hug now? Because I quite like touch. I might just have a hug and a bit longer and a bit longer. And then another sigh. I feel better now. Let's go make dinner.
I love the like kind of release, because that is true. It's like there's some sort of closure even without the closure when you have somebody to kind of absorb that with you. It's so much easier now. When we were younger, my husband and I, we both just did stupid stuff a lot more often. I think it was really, I'm thinking of like two different instances where one of us was drinking and did something stupid. And so it was really difficult to be the sounding board for the other person, because you feel like they're an extension of you. And it's like, no, you just did that thing and that embarrassed me. Like I'm not okay with it. But you realize, they're more embarrassed than I was. They need to. And that same thing could happen with a child. It's like a child is, or even yourself. It's like, no, I know I was probably very wrong. I was not my best self in that moment. But there's still not a lot of benefit of first going to that solving or the lecturing, whether it's yourself, your child, your partner, a friend. There's still a great need, I think, to just release and like feel like you didn't lose everybody in that moment of stupidity. And then you can go to the lesson. And I think so often that's what really comes down to the idea of toxic positivity, even when we're dealing with our own emotions. It's when we just try to override it with like, what's next? Or let's look on the bright side. Sometimes you need to feel the dark side first to actually even understand what the bright side is. And sometimes the most support that you can give somebody is to just sit with them in that dark side for a minute, sit under the rain cloud, get rained on too, let them cry, let you cry, let your child cry. And then you can kind of workshop a better way together.
And what you touched on there was that kind of the shame and regret that can come up, and maybe you're also in that situation you described in the bar. You're both drinking and they've done something silly, and they're feeling shame, and you're feeling shame, and sometimes it's about sitting in that together. I guess that you're feeling pretty ashamed about what happened, and they might be like, "Oh, if I could take it back, I would in a second." And it might just be like, "Yeah, I so hear you. I've also done things that I've felt a lot of shame around and wish I could take back." That's and like Brene Brown says, there's so much healing that can come in the simple words of, I've had that experience too. Me too. You're not alone with that. You're human. We make mistakes. And yeah, you did something that you regret. I felt some shame around it too. And I still love you. Very powerful and can be deeply healing, especially if what you heard growing up was you make a mistake and now you're unlovable. Now you need to be shouted at, because often that will be underneath the shame, will be that fear of I'm going to be told off, I'm going to be left, I'm going to be rejected. So to have your person move forward, and even it might just be you don't say a word, but you just reach across the car and just hold each other's hand, can be a very beautiful moment of that really sucked and I'm here, without saying a word. I think we all need that.
Well, I love leaving listeners with some actionable thing, or whether it's a thought exercise, something to focus on this week to really sort of ground what we've learned into their life, make this awareness a practice. If you were to give them one thing to either think about or to do, what would that be?
You're working with anxious attachment. Know that you have an anxious part, and that part is anxious for a reason. It didn't come from nowhere. So for this week, holding that anxious part really tenderly and gently. And rather than finding it annoying or wanting it to go away or it's such a nuisance, shifting your relationship with it just a little bit into more kindness, more compassion, more like a gentler holding, and maybe a bit of journaling coming from that part, hearing what it has to say, being with it in a different way.
Well, thank you so much for your focus on this particular topic. I know it's so helpful. Like I said, maybe just because I lived in LA for a long time, but like everybody I knew had anxious attachment issues. I think there is something to be said about doing too much self-development work. You go into like towns like Los Angeles and everyone's like, well, I had this anxious attachment wound from childhood and we all bond over it, but there's good and bad to it. So thank you again, because this does come up a lot. For listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to connect?
The book is called Heal Your Anxious Attachment. It's a bit like a mini course. It's got like 20 downloadable practices that are available on my website, which kind of come, you get the link with the book. My Instagram is psychotherapy.central. My website is psychotherapycentral.health. And there's other resources on there. There's some free stuff. But the book is a really beautiful guidebook to the work, and it can help anyone actually. But if you know that you have anxious tendencies, it's specifically focused around that anxiety relationally.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/346. Your challenge for this week is to acknowledge and give love to that anxious part of you. This is a great practice no matter what difficult feelings you are dealing with. I found that we go through this stage of conscious incompetence where we start to learn about ourselves, we learn about growth, and then we see it all. It's harder to ignore the things that have been driving us for so long. We don't have as many blind spots. And so it can often feel like we're getting worse before we're getting better. But really, we're just finally bringing awareness to some of the wounds. And like Jennifer said, those wounds are there for a reason, and they've caused a certain kind of coping mechanism within you. And so to beat them up is not doing yourself a service. Beating yourself up is just perpetuating the wounds, making you feel unworthy in a whole nother level. So how can you give love to and allow those parts to exist while also focusing to begin to rewrite those patterns? So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. I have some really exciting things coming up for you. First of all, the first ever Mind Love Retreat is happening in September. I am pulling out all the stops for this. I just booked our cacao ceremony facilitator, the best in all of Southern California. It's going to be a 3-hour, totally transformative ceremony. I have the chef lined up. It's going to be luxury organic food, every meal covered for you. Every detail is coming into place, and it's going to be absolute perfection, one-of-a-kind experience. You can find out more information at mindlove.com/retreat, or you can reach out to me on Instagram if you have any questions. We're already halfway full, and I haven't even officially announced it. So if you want to get in quickly. I do have payment plans available. So again, that's mindlove.com/retreat. I'm also gearing up for the next cohort of Soul Strength Activation. We've had some incredible transformations. I've been sharing the testimonials from our current cohort, but just the amount of life-changing shifts that we've seen in just a few short weeks, and we're not even completely finished as I'm recording this. So you can find out more just reaching out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa, and we can talk about it. We can set up a call if you want. And last but not least, you can find all of my amazing sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
Yes, Mr. Gecko, you're a huge inspiration to us all. But who was your muse?
Oh, my dear old Nan. She imparted many wise words to me. She would say, never let the fame get to your head, always remember who you are, and let people get more than just savings with Geico's fast and friendly claim support. I lived up to her advice, and now anyone can file a claim anywhere and anytime. I miss her so much.
Did she go somewhere?
Yeah, extended quilting trip.
Ah.
Get more than just savings. Get more with Geico.